Thank you for joining us on our journey here to preserve the history of mixed martial arts. When I wanted to take on this project, I needed help. I brought in one of my favorite matchmakers, Miguel, and the MMA detective, Mike Davis. So to do this, we've been able to preserve history. Welcome and enjoy.
Hey, Miguel back here on the Lights Out podcast. That's Mike Davis, the MMA detective. And when we're together, that usually means deep dive. Chris is preparing a guest, but there's a little bit of a twist this time. Mike, why don't you explain to the people?
Well, first and foremost, this is an MMA history podcast, and it's real easy to kind of remember everybody else, but every once in a while, you got to kind of look at yourself. So we're going to do Chris Lytle. We're going to do the first half of his UFC career, WEC UFC career, which is about 10 or 12 fights we're going to cover. And Miguel, we're going to have none other than the great Jeremy Horn join us for this.
Yeah, you know, I think that's exciting. For the first part where we did the pancreas years, we were joined by Jonah Williams, who's a kind of like a pinch hitter for the podcast. He helps us out in all kinds of ways. And this wasn't meant as a disrespect to Jonah, but I think even Jonah would say we got a little bit of an upgrade to Jeremy Horn. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm sorry, Jonah, but being honest with you, I think, Horn was around when Chris started, and he's still around now, and he's a guy who follows the sport. So I think he's going to have a little bit of a different insight and something that we look for. He brings another fighter's perspective in. So I think we'll get a real unique look at this core of fights here.
Well, he's also like cornered 3 or 4 of Chris's first 10 opponents in the WEC and UFC. So we're going to get, the conversations that were taking place in between the rounds on the other side. So if you want to talk about somebody that absolutely knows who Chris Lytle is, as good as you or myself, it's going to be the guy that had to study him 3 or 4 times, and that's Jeremy Horn.
And the other part of it is that Horn's a guy that very few people hate, and I don't think anybody really hates him and stuff, but he definitely has Chris's respect. So it should be made for a great podcast,
Absolutely. So ladies and gentlemen, I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Like, share, subscribe. You guys have no idea how much that helps us. Like, if you enjoy this podcast, you do us that tiny little solid. We've never asked you for a penny. It is greatly appreciated. On a side note, Diamond Sportsbook, betdsi.eu, betdsi.eu, up to $1,000 to give you 50% of your initial deposit. If you guys like action on sports, MMA, boxing, football, please go to betdsi.eu and use the promo code LytesOut. So Miguel, I think it's time, brother. Let's start.
Okay, welcome back. Another fantastic episode coming. I'm sure probably our best episode. Why? It's about me, my favorite thing. Now, you probably might be looking and going, why? I know the 2 guys on the right. Why is Jeremy Horn there? I mean, he's obviously worthy of his own. We've already did him. But we felt like in order to make me the subject matter, we need to have somebody in who's been fighting, has way more fights than me, can, critically break me down like I'm the new guy and I'm the idiot who knows nothing because he knows way more than me will ever know. We had to bring in the expert, my man. One guy who I really respect for the fact that, a lot of days he just went to School of Hard Knocks and learned and taught himself, and everything he knows is just from what he's learned. Fantastic, exactly the way I've always wanted to be, and just really respect the hell of this guy. So Jeremy, man, thank you for being here, and please be kind because I try hard. That's all I can say. I might not be the best fighter, but I'm trying.
I appreciate you guys having me. It's always enjoyable to talk to people that have been around with the sport as long as I have. So
yeah, cool.
Well, Jeremy, what year was your first fight?
97, I think.
Chris, yours?
98. I started training like maybe February 98 and had my first one probably 4 months later in 98. So.
A lot of history here. So Chris, we did the pancreas years already.
Yeah.
So now we're on the second half of your career. And as we've seen on your pancreas years, you have started to level up. You've found different gears. Whenever you kind of ran into issues, you've always seemed to kind of push through. And your first UFC fight outside of Ben Earwood was Robbie Lawler, April 25th, 2003. Jeremy, to help properly set this up, I think we can talk about Pete Spratt and Robbie Lawler get into a fight. And I think, was it his hip flexor or his hip bone?
Yeah. I'm not really sure all
Robbie?
that happened with that. Back then, Robbie was always, he was young and, he was, if I remember correctly, that was around the time when like all the supplements were all the rage. Like all the advertising was, this supplement is as close as you can get to actual steroids that's legal. And, this is the triple multiple dose of caffeine and that kind of crap. And so Robbie was into all of that. So from what I understand, he had taken some sort of, I don't know, some big over-the-counter supplement, and it caused some like a creatine kind of thing, caused some weird thing in his leg and caused him just pull a muscle easier than normal. So I don't know if it was his hip, but when Pete kicked him repeatedly, it just, like hyperextended his leg somehow. I don't know if it had something to do with like blood flow or, hydration or something like that. I don't know. At least that's what they had always said. So
Did he have surgery for that injury?
not as far as I know.
Okay, so his first fight back is one of Chris Lytle, November 21st, 2003, UFC 45. Chris, going into this fight, you got a heavy-handed Robbie Lawler, yourself with an extensive boxing background. You two collide. Why don't you walk us through it?
Well, yeah. I remember like I said before, when I fought for the UFC the first time with SEG, I remember not being impressed. I remember thinking, I'd rather fight over in Japan. I liked it better over there. I was underwhelmed. Well, then quickly after that, Zuffa and them got involved. And when I was paying attention, I was like, oh, this is the real deal. Now, these guys, I like the direction they're going in. I would like to fight for them again. However, Jeremy knew back then they didn't have many people. They didn't really have hardly anybody under contract. And they only put on about 6 fights a year. It was hard to get in there, and you couldn't just say, I'm ready to come back. They're like, no, they didn't care, so I had to fight a lot more local and win over some of those fighting, a lot of tough Midwestern guys. I know Aaron Riley was one of those guys, and just, Derek Noble, just having to continue to fight tough guys and beat a lot of the local Midwestern regional guys in order to get back there. So being brought into Robbie Lawler, I knew I'd watched him fight several times. I knew he was very hyped up, and I knew he was a strong, young, athletic guy. And I knew that I wasn't being brought in there to win. I think they thought it might be a good fight. They thought I was just a boxer, because I'd had, I think, probably 13 or 14 pro boxing fights at the time. And I don't even know if they knew I did MMA. I have no idea. I think they thought they were bringing in a boxer for Robbie Lawler to fight. It's kind of how I interpreted the fight.
So in the first round, there was a big slam followed by like attempted huge shots by Robbie.
Yeah.
And then I think you went for a heel hook after that. Am I correct? I know Rogan was yelling that it was close.
I know it surprised me right away that he tried to take me down, or that he did take me down. I wouldn't say try, because I thought we were going to stay in the bang at the beginning. And he picks me up and he takes me down. I remember I go for like a guillotine. I just remember thinking, okay, I got this in pretty good. I remember he picked me up off the ground and lifted me up over his head and kind of slammed me down. I was like, well, that's not normal. Like usually when you got a guy like some of a guillotine, he picked up me on the leg and kind of slammed me down. Didn't really hurt anything. But I remember thinking, yeah, this guy's strong. I'm gonna have to try and use a lot more technique and try to go for a couple submissions. But I don't know, Jeremy, do you remember? I mean, you guys were trained there. Was this just looked at as like this is going to be an easy fight, or do you remember what the word was?
I don't. We didn't really talk about it that much. I knew what it was. I knew who you were. I knew it was going to be a tough fight. But back then, Robbie was not as refined as he is now, and so we knew he was dangerous. But it was basically like all of my focus was always on trying to get him to calm down, stop being such a wild lunatic, because that's how he'd fight. He would just dive in, throwing haymakers. If you came close to him, he'd pick you up and throw you on the ground. Not really a takedown, just literally pick you up and throw you on the ground and then start swinging again. He just fought like a caveman back then. So I was like, dude, you've got to calm down. Chris is tough. He's not going to be an easy fight. Calm down. Fight smart.
So Chris,
much as that
with 20 seconds left in the first round, Robbie's on top of you throwing heaters. I mean, and you can only throw so many fastballs. And you throw an up kick that stuns him. Was your guess at this point, or was your strategy at this point just to kind of weather the storm and then push through?
Absolutely. I felt like what you said, if you're throwing fastballs like that, my plan was to just not take any heavy shots, let him wear himself out and try to take shots when I could. I was able to get a good up kick, and I know it landed pretty good. I didn't think it really hurt him, but I knew it landed good and it was going to look good, and it kind of enraged him a minute to throw some heavy punches. So that was kind of the game plan right there. I knew, I mean, I was fortunate enough to start training early with a lot of big guys. So I knew, I can't move people around and do what I want to do. I have to kind of play the game sometime and make them wear themselves out, and then I can do it. So that was kind of my game plan early when he was using a lot of strength, picking me up and slamming me, trying to throw heavy punch. I'm like, all right, just defend. Don't take clean shots. Like I didn't really eat any clean shots there, many, and just try and capitalize what I could. That up kick landed really well. I don't think it hurt him that much, but I mean, it looked good.
So in between the first and second round, I mean, Jeremy, I believe you were in Robbie's corner at this time. Were you guys just trying to get oxygen into him? Because that second round, you could see that Robbie tend to kind of take that second round off.
So I haven't seen this fight in a long time, but if this is the one I'm remembering, it is basically the first and the third round was pretty active. In the second round, he literally got on his bike and ran the entire second round. Okay. Yeah. So this is the one I was thinking it was. He absolutely did that. After that fight, we go back to the locker room, and I look at him and I go, I mean, good fight, blah, 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 all that stuff. I'm like, dude, what the hell was up with that second round? And he looks me right in the eye without missing a beat and goes, oh, I took that round off. That was it. I was like, yep, that was it. I took that round off because I was exhausted. And that was kind of his plan, was to go hard in the first, take the second round off, and then go hard in the third.
That's exactly what I remember. The second round, I was like end up stalking him around and following him and just trying to hit him when I could, landed a couple shots here and there, but it was hard for me to get a good drive.
He just was on his bike circling around the ring the whole round. Yep.
And I from my footage and watching him, I hadn't seen that, so it was a little surprising. I didn't know if he was hurt or what was going on. So I took the round. I was like, all right, cool. I'll add these points up, and I'll take the round. But I knew it wasn't really the fight I wanted or how I want to go. But I was like, hey man, I'll take what he's giving me. That's all I could do. I'm not going to run there and act stupid. But you can tell if you watch it, he's on his bike and he moves and wouldn't engage.
He threw like half a dozen punches that whole round, just backed off the whole time. Yep.
Yeah.
So in the third round, Chris, you kept setting traps, and Robbie was biting, and you were just kind of nickel and diming him on the punches. And at one point, you could see Robbie got real frustrated, and you guys start yelling at each other. And I think both of you guys start clapping, and then you guys just kind of run in at one of those like coin toss 50-50 where someone's going to get dropped. And when both right hands landed, I think you went on your back.
I remember what happened there. I landed a couple good punches. I hit him once really good and kind of knocked him back. And then that's when he just like flexed and started screaming. So, I got kind of hyped up and I started clapping. I was like, yeah, let's go. Let's do this. And then I started throwing hard punches, and I got out of control, and I threw a right hand, and my feet squared up, and we both, I instead of keeping in good position, I threw a right hand, and both feet were square, and hit with that right hand. If you get hit with one of Robbie's right hands and you're not in a good position, I had nowhere to go but backward, and I knew as soon as he hit me, I was like, I had no balance. And I remember this. So as soon as he hit me and I started falling back, I remember thinking, man, it was a good shot, but didn't hurt me. So I was like, you got to do something to let him know you didn't hurt you. So I tried, as soon as I hit the ground, I started clapping, so I'm kind of falling. I'm kind of like, good shot, but you didn't hurt me. You know what I mean? So then I was like, come on down. And he didn't. So I was like, all right, I'm going to get right. He let me back up. So I was like, cool, I'm right back up. And I remember listening to Joe Rogan, then be like, Lytle better be careful. He'll get knocked out. I'm like, all right, cool. Whatever, you guys don't know what you're talking about. But he did hit me with a good shot. That was one of the few times I can ever remember getting knocked down in the MMA fight with a punch, was by that.
Yeah. Jeremy, if you remember, after that, Robbie starts taking the rest of the round off again. And then the last minute, it gets real intense. And Chris, you end with a suplex. Robbie reverses the position and just kind of starts throwing heavy punches down. And that was kind of the end of the round. It was pretty intense. You could tell, also, I think Chris, you were pointing either, I think you were pointing at Robbie limping where you thought he would have been hurt. It was almost as if that fight had just started.
I'd hurt my ankle at one point. I tried to kick him and I kind of bit my ankle back, and that hurt me pretty good. I was limping around for a long time. That was just from a shitty kick, you know, and yeah, my ankle was hurting pretty good there. But yeah, no, I remember, you know, somehow at the very end, I got behind him. I tried to, you know, score some points and suplex him and try and get a choke in, but I knew there wasn't much time left, so I didn't like try and go through. It was like less than 10 seconds. I've heard the 10-second bell, so I didn't like try to get the hooks in and do everything right. I just tried to hurry up and throw a choke in. He reversed and got on top and do some punches, but that was one of those really fun fights where you kind of forget everything else going on around you and you just kind of fall into the moment. And like, I didn't care if there was 1,000 people there, 100,000 people watching, or just me and him. It would have been the same fight. You know, that was one of those just kind of rare exceptions, just to forget everything else and just fight. I love those times.
Yeah. So Jeremy, Robbie's 7-1. Chris is 26. Was it 9-4 at the time? Except it's a deceiving record because it's 26-9-4 with the majority of his fights being in Japan, which I mean is never kind to anybody's record.
No.
Did you guys have some concerns going into that in regards to the experience and Robbie being fast tracked?
Yeah, I mean, there's always concerns. I mean, like I said, I was a fan of the sport back then as much as I was a competitor. So I watched fights all the time. And like I said, I knew who Chris was. I knew it was going to be a tough fight, but you couldn't pick your opponents back then. UFC would call and everybody wanted to fight in the UFC, and they would say, look, this is who you're fighting. This is how much we're paying you. Show up on this day. And there was no negotiating. You would say yes, or I'm hurt and I can't fight. That's it. Those were your only options.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, they want Robbie to fight Chris. I guess we're fighting Chris. That's, you know.
Hey, Jeremy said negotiating, so I wanted to ask Chris. At this point, it's UFC 45. Have you shed the Phyllis Lee albatross? Are you with Keith Palmer now, or are you still giving 20% over to old Phyllis?
I remember at this point, it was funny because I was told in no uncertain terms of UFC wouldn't deal with Phyllis, which was obvious, you know what I mean? So, you know, I remember at this point, we have.
That's right, Dana.
A gentleman
Dana
by the
kind
name
of
of Blander. We have a gentleman by the name of Mike Camp who's at the gym, you know, big Godsey fan. He keeps trying, you know, to Chris.
Super manager.
I'll call the UFC for him like that. You know, and he keeps saying, I talked to them about, he got like married in the cage and all that. Like, I'm talking to him about, I'm like, he's not my manager, you know what I mean? So, I mean, and so he comes like, Chris, I've been talking to you about, and he always tried to say that he got me the fight. You know, Keith was, I don't really know. I never asked him to do anything for me. And I was just like, I don't really want to be associated with him. It's like, he's a nice guy, but man, he's out there. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I'm not
Chris,
dealing.
Who was a better manager, Mike Camp or Phyllis Lee?
Like that, I'm not. He was never my manager, so I really can't say.
That's a trick question, Jeremy.
Good answer.
Trick question.
So I was pretty much doing it. Really, there was no manager for it. Joe Silva would call me directly and talk to me directly and offer me money directly, and that was kind of it. There was no middleman, and it's like Jeremy said, there was no real negotiation. I mean, I can talk to you. We'll talk after at my next fight how the negotiations went, but yeah.
Here's a little trivia. Like you mentioned, Mike Camp got married in the octagon. His best man was Mike Davis.
It may be a different one.
I know you love him, Mike. That's why.
Yeah, he's a weird dude. All right. So
after that, I talked to Joe Silva and he was like, yeah, we love what you did. You put on a great fight. Just go outside the UFC and fight again. And if you win, we'll beat somebody good. We'll love to have you back. So like, all right.
So is this a 1-fight contract now? They're only doing 1-fight contracts?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah. At this point, well, even prior to this, they were having champions of theirs fight on other people's shows like Pat Miletich, and not always coming out, you know, on top in those shows. I mean, there's more than a few times where UFC champions have lost while maintaining their belt in the UFC. And, you know, to have a real organization, you can't have that. You know,
I think when
gotta,
I think when BJ Penn beat Matt Hughes and didn't have a long-term deal and then went and fought somewhere else, like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. That's when they start locking people down and be like, we're not. They were learning just like everybody else.
yeah. So your next fight, January 2nd, 2004. I remember seeing this one in person. Reality shoot fighting, Pete Spratt. That was a perfect matchup for you. How does something like this come together?
I don't remember exactly how it came together. I just remember he just beat Robbie, and I was thinking, okay, they told me to fight somebody good and beat them to get back in. I was like, that opportunity came up, and it was for Randy Greenman, I believe, was it not?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it was for Randy Greenman. I was like, yeah, he paid decent, and it was all about trying to get back to UFC. So I knew Pete Spratt beat Robbie, so it was a no-brainer. Give me that fight, and I'd love to do it.
So, Jeremy, were you there? It was, I know Matt Hughes was, Karo Parisian was in attendance. Did you ever go to the reality shoot fighting shows with the promoter Randy Greenman in Belleville, Illinois?
Yeah, that name is really familiar. I know I did some stuff in Belleville. It was, I want to say it was Brian Madden was the main guy when I was going down to Belleville, but I think I probably was there more often than not.
So Brian Madden was a pro wrestling guy. He's got a promotion, has a heart attack, unfortunately passes. Randy Greenman takes his spot there, and Randy Greenman was washing drug money through his events and putting these incredibly extravagant events on with just amazing cards. All you got to do is look it up. And he ended up in several different places at one time, unfortunately.
That means he got killed and cut apart by by people.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, true tragedy.
You might remember him, Horn, because he was like 400 pounds too. So I don't know if you remember like being around a huge dude, but you'd remember him if you met him.
Yeah, no, I don't. I may have. I don't know. I get
loved
punched
the
in the
highest
head a lot.
stance.
So
Yeah, he loved the highest stance system. He was anything Goker or Judo Gene.
Okay.
Like he was kind of a mark for those guys. Phenomenal human being. I loved that guy, and I loved his shows. So, Chris, from there, it's January 2nd. You've got a quick turnaround. You're kind of one of those throwback fighters that will schedule other events really quick, in between bouts. And you were supposed to be on WEC 9, January 16th, 2004, against JT Taylor, and it was canceled.
Yeah, when was my fight before that with Pete? What was that?
January 2nd.
January 2nd. That was January 9th.
January 16th was the other one.
Okay, so it was like, yeah, I used to fight if I could every, I didn't, and I can't remember if I kind of got hurt doing something, or if I had a boxing match in there or something. But yeah, that was an interesting one because that for some reason I can't remember exactly what happened, but that fight got canceled, and that JT Taylor goes on to start really bashing me on the internet. It was started calling me a pussy and a coward. I need to quit the sport if I can't live up to my stuff. And I'm just like, who is this guy? I didn't even know who he was. I never heard the guy. And I was just like, it definitely made me take notice to who he was, because I said, well, I want to fight this guy next time it's available. I'm not passing up on this opportunity. Make sure I do fight this guy. I remember telling that.
So WEC 9, obviously that doesn't come to fruition. Jeremy, did you ever come into issues with that? People kind of questioning your honor, but I don't think you've ever pulled out of a fight before.
No, I mean, there was a couple. I got hurt a couple of times, once or twice. I wasn't able to fight, but no, that's the thing. I mean, people, especially in the Midwest, man, everybody knows that everybody wanted to fight. And, Monty had talked about this in the past. Back then, people would do everything they could to fight. Like you would hide injuries from people, like, yeah, my shoulder's dislocated, but I'm fine. I'll fight anyway. Because you got to fight so rarely that you would do anything to fight. So people pulling out of fights, if you were, if you were a real fighter, you knew people don't pull out of fights for bullshit reasons. Everybody wants to fight. So by that same token, if you were then criticizing somebody for pulling out of a fight, then somebody in that scenario is a bitch. Because I'm a real fighter and I know that guy's a real fighter, I'm not going to criticize him for pulling out because I know him. I know he wants to fight.
come to find out later, that was this guy's MO. He would do that. He picked the fight, got in there with Dennis Holman. I somehow got a draw. He picked the fight. Like, he went into Matt Lindland's gym and like started talking trash to him there. I was just like, dude, what is this guy like a death wish? I don't know, but he continued to bash me on the end. I was like, dude, all right, this guy's, I mean, if he would have been smart, if he lays low and be quiet, I might not even pay attention to him. He might be able to sneak up on me a fight, but when I did fight him, I was definitely ready.
Yeah.
And guys like that expose themselves sooner rather than later, just because, if you're running your mouth, people know, like, that's just not the way this sport works for the most part. A little different now, but back then,
it wasn't really about selling a fight. Like, if it's selling a fight, there's pay-per-view points involved.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, but something was wrong with this guy. He did that to more than just me. So it's like, after I found that out, first, like, who the hell, what is this guy talking about, man? If I could fight every weekend, I'd like to, I tried to as much as I can, that was especially early. I mean, and I think in between there, if you look at you're looking at my MMA record, if you look at my boxing record, I think there's still boxing matches scheduled at the same time as all these other fights. So in between MMA, there is pro boxing fights going on.
Well, April 2nd, 2004, UFC 47, poor Tiki Goshen. He had just a terrible run in the UFC, just an unlucky run. That's your next opponent. Do you recall that one?
Oh, yeah. Here's the fight I always talk about when people talk about, the UFC. They didn't put on a lot of fights back then, because I fought Robbie Lawler in UFC 45. I didn't fight in UFC 46, but I fought in UFC 47. And I had a fight in between there. I had Pete Spratt in between there and probably a boxing match. So, you know what I mean? It's
5 months in between. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that was I only missed one UFC. So, but I remember here's what I remember about that. I got the phone call after I beat Pete Spratt, for the Tiki fight. And they're like, Joe Silva, Chris, we got your fight for you, Tiki. I said, all right, cool. I'd love to do it, man. And man, how much? And he's like, $2,000. I was like, what? I was like, man, I just fought for that. I thought I put on like a fight of the night performance. I thought that, we could start getting past this. And he's like, it's what it pays, Chris. I was like, I need more. And I was like, man, I just need more than that. And he's like, that's what this fight pays. If you'd have won, you'd have got more. I was like, man, when he says stuff like that, it's just like, all right. And I was like, I can't do it. And he's like, all right. And I remember I sat there for a couple of minutes and I called him back and said, yeah, I'll do it. I mean, that's right then when I knew you don't negotiate with them, man. I mean, they have all the cards in their hand, and what are you going to do? I was at their mercy at that point for then. Until I had more to offer, I had to just do what they said, really. That was a very, I don't know if humbling experience is the right word. That bothered me when I found just kind of the way they played it. And they were right. That it's not till years later I learned at that point they're about $30 to $40 million in debt. So I kind of get it, but at the time I remember being really pissed about it, and it was rough.
So you end the fight with a bulldog choke, but it started with, and obviously you won. It started with you stating neither of us like to shoot for takedowns, and both of us like to stand to trade. And Tiki's response was, yeah, I bet you he's the first one to shoot. And unfortunately, I think Tiki may have shot and wound up in that bulldog choke.
Well, the thing that I remember most about that fight is that was one of my, that was probably the worst. I don't know if you, Jeremy, I'm sure you've been the swing bout before. Have you ever been the swing bout many times? Yeah. I hate that, man. So I remember that I'm there and they go, you're going to be the swing bout. I'm like, okay, I know what that is, but what does that entail here? And they're like, well, we're going to come after somewhere, but you're going to be on the main card. So maybe after the first fight, the second fight, or the third fight, one of these times you're going to go on. We'll let you know when. I was like, all right. And so, or maybe I can't remember, but I know about 5 times they came in and said, you might be up. And then I'd get up and I'd start warming up and hit the mitts and start sweating. And they'd come in and be like, no, you're not up next. I'm like, all right. I'd sit back down and just relax, cool back down. They said, okay, you might be up next. And I think they probably did it 4 or 5 times. And then they came and said, you might go on after the main event. I'm like, after what? I was like, this can't be real. So
yeah, being in the swing bout is garbage.
Well, that actually makes you the main event.
No. Well, that's what they said. But then luckily for me, right, all of a sudden they didn't give much time to warm. They go, okay, you're going now. I'm like, now? Yeah, it was right before Tito Chuck one. So I remember I went out, we were so to me, we're the co-main. We were the swing out, we went out right before that. And, but I just remember feeling extremely flat, like I really didn't feel like I was on my A game, because I think it's because I warmed up and cooled down so much. I won the fight and everything, but I just didn't feel like I was on my A game, because I just didn't feel quite crisp like normal. I only thing I can attribute it to was the fact that I was at swing bout and they warmed me up a bunch and cooled down. Only good thing was my opponent had to go through the same thing. So, I mean, I can't really complain about that. And I was able to get that that bulldog choke. And I remember this too. I remember being afterwards, we were, at the after fight press conference, and I can't remember who Pat Miletich had been cornering, but he said he came in. He's like, "How'd your fight go, Chris? Did you win?" I was at the hospital. I was somewhere else. I said, "Man, it was great. I won by I won by a choke." And he looked at me and he's like, "Were you going to say by the same choke that Carlos Newton got me?" I was like, "Yeah." I started laughing. He's like, "Yeah." And he started laughing. I was like,
I got it in my notes.
I was about to be like, "I got him in the same thing he got you in," but I caught myself, but he knew. That was hilarious, man. I was like, shit.
Yeah. So Jeremy, the bulldog choke, you were in the corner of Pat when he fought Carlos Newton that night. How difficult was it for you as a corner man?
Oh, it was real hard. I kind of knew when he did it, I knew why he did it. He should have turned the other way. We all know that. And Pat kind of turned the wrong way, but it's funny because we had just recently been working with a guy, a real good wrestler. I can't remember who it was, but he was in the gym training with us, and he was always really good at that, kind of like that underarm spin that would bring you out the other side. And that's exactly what he tried to do. He was coming up one way, tried to turn the other way, and ended up just walking right into that choke. And the only reason he tried it is because he'd been so impressed by watching the wrestler do it at the gym the weeks before that. That was not what he wanted to do. That was not what he normally would have done, but it was kind of top of the mind. He's like, "Hey, I want to try that, and here's an opportunity." So
that's wild.
Yeah.
So Ronald Juhn, Chris, UFC 49, August 21st, 2004. Ronald Juhn is 26-11-2. You are 28-10-4.
Yeah. I just remember watching him, really, I'd never seen him fight live, but I'd seen a lot of his fights, over in Hawaii, and just knew he was tough as nails, and just watching him go the distance several times and grind out fights. It's like, it's not going to be an easy fight. Ronald Juhn's a tough ass guy, a lot of experience, and just a hard nosed guy. Those guys from Hawaii, like you said, they were just pretty hard nosed, and those guys love to trade and bang. And I just knew it was going to be a tough fight. So, I felt like I had the experience in boxing, and I was more than willing to trade hands with anybody who wanted to throw hands with me. So that was definitely the game plan going in. I felt like he was going to want to stay in the bank, and I was going to try and stay in the bank, see who won.
I think this is one of those fights that was incredibly frustrating for Juhn. Every bit of offense that he would try to mount, you would more than counter it effectively. And you won the fight with the guillotine choke in the second round, but it's a move you attempted 3 other times in the fight. What made you continue going back to a move that wasn't effective until it was?
Well, because I was close each time. I didn't want to take those. He was giving them to me in a way, but I knew he was good at getting out of it because he got out the first 2 times. So I just had to adjust and think, okay, I got to get my right leg over his back. And if I can keep him in from being able to escape, I'm going to get this. But it was just a matter of, it was kind of a race to see who could get to the position first. And he kind of beat me the first 2 times, but I knew how he beat me. It was about correcting that and stopping that from happening. So, as soon as I felt like he was on top and I could just feel the position, I had the choke locked in. I know as soon as I roll over, I got to throw this leg over, and then he's not going to be able to get out. And that's exactly what happened. It was kind of cool because he did like the double tap. I had it locked in there real deep, and he tapped with both hands. So I knew it was in there good when you're tapping with both hands, like, oh shit, this is tight. So it was just that one was really good because it might not look like it, but there's a lot of chess match going on there. Like I said, he knew exactly how to counter what I was doing, but I knew how to counter how he was countering it. So it's just a matter of who could win that race. He won the first two. Congratulations. I'm going to win this race eventually. And I did.
So, Jeremy, in your experiences, at this time, let's talk about Ronald Juhn real quick. Why there, as Chris Brennan had said, we've had him on obviously a few times. He says, and why all they do is train stand up. They're monsters at being able to, attack with their legs and hands. But where they lack is their ground game. And Ronald Juhn, at this time, his wife's expecting the fifth kid. There's a lot of life changes. And as accomplished as he is, sometimes in life, there's a fight that takes place that you don't really recover. And he goes 3-14 in his next 17 bouts after that.
Wow.
And he's a savage.
Yeah, I would never, if you told me, I wouldn't believe that if I didn't know it was coming from a reputable source. Yeah, Ronald was always a monster. Surprising.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, but I mean, sometimes there's just life happens where you don't know how to transition from the fight game, but you need the money. And that's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, it certainly isn't telling of who he was as a fighter.
Well, Chris, let me hit you up with this question here. You had taken a loss to Lawler, tried negotiating with him, didn't work out. Now you've won 2 in a row. You're probably feeling a little bit better about yourself. Did you try it again? Or was that just a wall you weren't going to get? Or how was your contract status at this point?
I mean, I was, they had you're going up a little bit each time. That was just what they were saying. Oh, you get this now, you get this now. And I would try and, hey, can we do this and that? And they'd be like, I just remember it didn't really go well when we were trying to negotiate well with, you know what I mean? I mean, I didn't have a team of people behind me who were like, collective. I don't know if it worked for you guys when you guys had several people there, Jeremy. Like, you guys had 8 guys in the UFC. I had me. So it's like,
it definitly helped.
Yeah.
Did you ever get an extra plane ticket out of them one time or?
No, this is what really pissed me off. And this was even after that, like after I'm on the Ultimate Fighter, after I get, a little bit more love from them. I remember at one point that in your contract, you get 4 tickets, for your family to come to each fight. Like, all right. At one point it was in Vegas. I go, hey, my in-laws are coming. I got my wife, I got my son. Can I get one more ticket? And they're like, we're going to have to take $250 out of your person, Chris. I was like, what? They go, your contract says 4. We're only going to give you 4. And I was like, wow. I was like, it's like that? All right. I see how we're going to, we ain't friends at all. We're business associates. That's when they told me that they might be nice to me and smile like, you're great, but we're not friends.
That was always the way it went. It got worse as they went on, but that's how it was. Like, oh, you want an extra ticket from us? No, we're going to charge you. But hey, we want you to come out a week early and do a bunch of press for us.
Exactly.
So you said, oh, you want me to leave my family a week early? I'm going to need another $3,000 for that. It's unheard of. So you do all the favors for them, but they're going to nickel and dime everything from you.
But it was weird. Like you said, I thought we were friendly, okay, but no, we're friendly when it helps you out, but when it helps me out, it's a business. I'm like, no, you show me it's a business. We're not friends. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
And that was a little disheartening, but it's just, So I realized that every time I had to try and do anything, I realized that was the case. It's a business. It's not a friendship. It's like when I get to do stuff with you, Miguel. they're not treating me like, you guys did.
At hook and shoot. That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
It doesn't take any money. Just, I don't know.
So Jeremy, around this time, I remember I had a few conversations with Jens Pulver, and I actually witnessed a conversation between Jens Pulver and Jeff Osborne, where they were like, it's almost as if they need us to pay them to fight, like on in their promotion. And they were like, that might happen. Like, it wasn't out of the realm of possibilities in the conversation I heard between those two.
Yeah, that someday the power would switch a little bit and we would realize that the promotions need the fighters.
Well, they were saying that the fighters eventually are going to be paying to fight in the UFC.
Oh, no. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, because the mentality back then, everybody wanted to fight, you want to make a little bit of money, but I mean, I fought plenty of times for free or next to no money. I'm sure Chris did as well. Cause like, look, I want to fight. I will drive myself to the fight. I mean, if you're willing to get me a hotel room, great. Otherwise, I'll sleep in my car. I want to fight.
But how about, let me ask you both this question. Did you guys ever like have like already at a high level, like getting a decent paycheck, right? Like, cause it's like everybody thinks, oh, you're making 10 grand. It's like, wow, $10,000. But it goes fast. How many fights did you run like at a negative? Did you actually lose money trying to get prepared for the fight and then didn't make it up because maybe you took a loss, didn't get the double? I mean, that scenario does happen to fighters at the start of their UFC scenario. You know, when they start in the UFC and they're 2-2, they want a strength and conditioning coach and this, that, and the other stuff for starters. They're dead. So talk about how that affected you guys.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
You know, for me, it never really hit me much, but I had a different mentality. I imagine Chris was kind of in the same boat in that from day one, I wanted to fight. I love to train. I love martial arts. So I was in the gym every single day. And so for me then to go take a fight was not this huge schedule shift and big change of what I'm doing. You know, in 99, I think it was, I had like 35 fights and my schedule was train Monday through Thursday, drive to the fight on Friday, fight on Saturday, drive home on Sunday, and go back to the gym on Monday. Because that's what I love to do. So it wasn't, oh, I need a professional coach. I need a nutritionist. I need this, I need that. I need a gym and some partners to train with because it's what I love doing. And it's changed a bit now, but I still think people go a little bit too overboard. You know, I mean, yeah, you can hire a nutritionist to help you out a little bit when you're trying to tweak those super high-end details. But if you don't know how to use Google and YouTube to find out what a healthy diet is, you're an idiot. You know, same thing with your conditioning. Yes, you can hire a professional to really tweak that high-end stuff, but to get in reasonable shape, you don't need to be paying somebody $1,000 an hour to stand there and tell you what to do. If you love training, you can always stay in shape, you know, and maybe ramp it up a notch for the last little bit of time before your fight. But this whole idea of I'm going to be a slovenly pig for a couple of months, and then when I have a fight coming up, I got to go into fight camp and change my entire life to be ready for this fight. If you're a martial artist and you love to fight and you love to train, you're in decent shape all the time.
Agreed, man. I've heard people talk about that. Well, I had to try these people and I lost money going this. I'm like, even when I made $2,000, you know, I never even came near losing money. I don't understand. I mean, I paid my coaches 10% no matter what, you know, paid my manager their fee, whatever. Or if I didn't have one at the time, I didn't pay. But I mean, I just don't understand. Like you said, back in the day, you didn't fight for money, like Horn is saying. Like, I fought no matter what, and I didn't get paid many times. And even sometimes when I was supposed to get paid, I didn't. But anyway, it's like, I fought because I loved it. You know, I remember when I fought in that submission underground thing, Tails first one. I remember the email or text message he sent me. It's like, I got an opportunity for you. Jake Shields, no money. I remember thinking, well, no money. And I was like, how can I pass up the chance to get to go against Jake Shields in a grab? I'm in, you know. And he was like, really? I'm like, yeah, I mean.
You surprised him?
Yeah. I was like, well, how can I pass that opportunity up?
Yeah.
And that's why I think you talk about like real fighters. Like, I know Jeremy would want to fight the best just because how are you going to get that opportunity? Go in there with the best. Why not? You know, it's a grappling match. I don't care if I lost a grappling match. I did. So, but it was an opportunity to go in there. And that was the thought, you know, I want to go. And like Jeremy said, I never didn't train. I was in the gym every day, no matter what. I don't know if I just didn't want to get out of shape or I just loved being in the gym and training, but I never missed. That was just not going to be an option. And I was more, I would say like Rocky IV type training, like carrying bricks. It's like, not like that, but just hard training. Like, I don't have to have a nutritionist. And if you don't know how to eat healthy, you're an idiot. That chocolate cake, you can't eat. You know, that beer, you can't drink. That chicken breast, you can probably eat it. You know what I mean? So if you can't figure that out, I don't know what we're talking about here. And I've been an athlete and working out my whole life. I know how to lift weights. And this is funny. I do remember when I went on the Ultimate Fighter. I remember the first day, it's like, okay, we're doing plyometrics. And I was like, plyometrics? What is this?
Carpentry?
You speak about. And they were like, you don't do plyometrics? I'm like, no. They're like, how do you even make it here, Chris? I'm like, I don't know. You know, But then
By
I
a
picked
plane.
up on. I carry rocks, I'm like, but I picked up on how to do plyometrics, and I picked up, if you don't pick up on little things, you're not very smart. But I mean, fortunate or unfortunate for me, I never really had the option to go all over the country and train. Like, I was a fireman for Indianapolis and had 4 kids. I was locked in. I would go to my gym every day and train, or I might go to one of those, I remember Acceleration Indiana, where they had me on treadmills doing sprints. I did like cardio stuff, and I would go to, but I'd get sponsorship for that. But I mean, I think Jeremy is accurate. You don't need to go spend tons of money, and if you do that, maybe you're at the high end. Like, if you're fighting for a title, maybe you need to. But if you're a prelim guy at the UFC, I wouldn't advise you to go, get 3 coaches and fly them all down to Brazil. That's crazy.
Well, Jeremy, you were one of obviously the main coaches at, one of the greatest gyms in the world at the time, the Miletich Fighting Systems. And did those guys ever kick up to you and give you a percentage for all the hard work you put in?
No.
Probably never even asked.
It wasn't expected. Like, I mean, I was there training with my team. It wasn't really like I'm the head of the table and you guys are all paying me. I was fighting. I was making money. I didn't pay them. They were my training partners. We were all training together. I mean, it was just a club of people that wanted to train together.
Jeremy, you had mentioned that, getting a nutritionist and paying $1,000 an hour, that's kind of a fancy way of saying Mike Dolce, because Mike Dolce really came onto the scene and did incredible work. Like, his job that he did with the fighters that he brought along to make weight, the guy was phenomenal. But he also took a lion's share of their purse. And so when you got a manager, a nutritionist, a trainer, all these things, it's too much. And I remember when the UFC offered him, okay, we're going to put you on a salary. You can live out here in Vegas. You're going to have to kind of do this with everybody. It was kind of like, well, no, I'm making more money this way. So what they do, they just hired 3 other people that did the same job, just as good as him, that knew how to use Google. And, now, he's sitting at home.
I mean, that's the thing. There are different levels of commitment. Like, like we've been saying, if you don't understand the basics of dieting, cleaner, healthy, more natural food is better for you, right? Everybody knows that. Eat in correct portions and eat what you need. Keep the garbage to a minimum. Okay, that's not rocket science. But to understand that somebody, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a nutritionist, but somebody that understands, hey, if you eat chicken with this particular vegetable, it creates blah 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 blah. I mean, there are some things you can learn at the higher end, but I don't know that everybody needs that crap. Most people don't. It gets really frustrating to me when I hear people at my gym, people that have a day job, that are not looking to be professional fighters, that want to take a couple of amateur fights, that want to start talking about fight camp. It infuriates me, because this is a lifestyle that you lead. Are you a martial artist? Are you a fighter? I'm a fighter till the day I die. That's who I am. Right? I'm not somebody that's a fighter for 6 weeks leading up to a fight, and then afterwards I'm a blob again. Right? That's just not how it works. And so people got to change that mentality.
Jeremy, I mean, I'm almost of the belief right now, if you have to hire a nutritionist to tell you exactly, you might be cutting too much weight. I mean, I'm not a fan of kill myself for weight cut. I'm the opposite. I think you should be more of a natural weight. Or I get cutting some weight, you're cutting 15 pounds. That's one thing. But if you're cutting 40, 30 pounds, I don't believe in it.
Yeah, I agree. There should be some kind of rule about that. Some of the organizations have done it with like the hydration testing and stuff like that. And I definitely would support that. I understand it's expensive and I understand it's hard. Everybody wants an advantage somehow. But yeah, when you get guys that are fighting at 185 and they're fucking 220 by the time they get in the ring the next day and they're shredded, you're looking for some kind of advantage rather than just being better than your opponent.
Yeah.
Be more skilled.
Yeah. Well, I think and listen, I'm sitting here in Chicago. What do I know about anything? But Jeremy, you're in Utah and you're probably in the top 1% of anybody that's ever stepped in the ring in terms of experience. And I think you've never gotten cut in a fight. And I think you've only been stopped, twice, 3 times?
A couple times, yeah. But
very few.
Submissions, yeah.
I'm thinking that it's possible that like your mentality might be greatly different than even people in the UFC, and you're expecting guys that have 9-to-5 jobs to have the same mentality as yourself, which is insane.
Well, I mean, maybe, but I always tell people the same thing. Like I am very fortunate as a fighter that people enjoyed watching me fight enough that I got paid to fight. Because if I didn't get paid to fight, I'd been working a full-time job and fighting on the weekends anyway. Like I fight because I love to fight, and I am incredibly fortunate, and I'm sure Chris feels the same way. I am fortunate that I was, people enjoyed watching me fight enough that I got to make money off of that. But I fought because I love to fight, not because I wanted to make money. This is not an easy pathway to make money.
And like you said, if you would have got people get into the sport now to make money. When we got into the sport, that was not the goal at all. And if you thought that was the goal, you're very bad at math because there was very little money involved.
Yep.
I mean, I didn't know anybody who made a lot of money early on. It was just, it was just something that I watched and I was like, man, I want to, and once you do it once, like, I want to do that again, man. Like it's very addictive. If you could take that feeling of, right after a fight and, being successful and put it in the pill form, you have a lot of money involved with that, man. That's a very good feeling. And, especially early, you're not getting, I remember the first time I got paid like $300. I was like, I got paid too. I was like, oh my God, this is great.
What a deal.
Yeah. I could go out to eat now, because you were paid to go to the gym. It was crazy.
I was going to say a lot of, what gets some people, because most fighters are pretty grounded with focus, especially when they're trying to get to a certain level. But you guys avoided a lot of pitfalls with lifestyle because you get paid $2,000 in Vegas. I guarantee you half the card is going home without any of their money. You know what I mean? Either they blew it in strip joints or at the card table or at the bar, but nothing's cheap there, nothing like that. And $2,000 is really not that much. So you guys also managed to avoid pitfalls through maturity and experience, early on, which is good.
I didn't avoid all of them. I spent more money than I should have, but it was always funny. There were people, and I'm sure again, Chris, you experienced this in Japan. There were some guys that, you show up in Japan and that not only were they going to pay you, but they would give you like a per diem to eat daily.
Oh,
well, for me, I'm like, you're giving me $40 a day. I'm here for a week. That's like $500 extra I'm going home with. Like I'm going to live on table scraps because I just made $500 extra. And then other people are like, I'm getting $40 a day. I guess I can blow that on whatever. And then I'll still find money to eat daily,
Yeah. You give me extra money. I remember when,
I'll pay for my own food.
you get done with that Ultimate Fighter. And I remember, I don't know if you're supposed to say this, but they take you out to like a strip club, but they'll take you out to dinner, take you out to a strip club. And then they give you like $500 worth of poker chips or whatever. And it's like, okay, go have a ball. You know what I mean? With all the girls. I talked to one of the girls and got her to like I gave her a bunch. She gave me like $300. I gave her my chips. So I got the money back.
I'd be like, all right, where can I cash these in? I'm not going to gamble. Give me $500 in poker chips. I'm going home with $500.
Yeah. It was awesome.
Yeah. So you mentioned a name earlier. Well, first off, Chris, you're kind of bouncing from, I'm not going to say bouncing from gym to gym, but you're at Rings, Indianapolis at this time.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. I was with the same, you got to understand something. I was with pretty much like the integrative fighting with Jason Gotze. And when that was constantly evolving, like we'd be at that gym changed places and names so many times just because like we'd team up with somebody, they'd have a gym for us for a while. I mean, the gym business, our gym wasn't a gym about, it was a fighter gym. And if anybody knows fighter gyms are losers. They don't make money. You know what I mean? If you want a real gym, it's got to be geared around, soccer moms and kids classes. That was like, we were just pure fighters. So those things suck and they always close. So we were constantly going here to this gym for a while. Then it closed because like there would be no bills being paid. And then we'd go to this gym for a while. And then somebody be like, I want to partner up with you guys, and you'd be at their location for a while. That probably happened at least 10 times. So the gym was constantly evolving and changing. Same group of people were always there though.
Okay, good. So JT Taylor, you mentioned his name earlier. WEC 12, October 21st. Obviously, you just win in the UFC. They don't have a fight lined up. is there some sort of caveat about taking fights outside of their organization at this point, or did they just not care?
They didn't care. They were like, man, here, basically they're like this. I'm going to give you maybe 3 fights a year. Just depends. I mean, and like I said, they're putting on, what do you think, Jeremy, 5 or 6 or 8 fights a year back then?
5.
UFC.
That might be a bit much. I want to say it was like once every 4 months, maybe every 3 months. So yeah, we're talking 3, maybe 4 fights a year.
So they're putting on 3 or 4 fights a year, and you ain't getting on every card. And I'm not fighting 2 or 3 times a year. You know, I remember had 5 fights in a month a couple of times. So I'm like, I'm fighting whenever I can. So WEC was a very reputable organization, you know, and you know, Scott Adams took good care of me when I went out there. He was, you know, treated me very well. So when he got a hold of me and asked me, you know, and I told him after the way this guy talked trash about me, I was like, make sure I'm fighting this guy next time. So make sure when the fight card comes up and you get looking for an opponent for me, make sure it's him, because he's not getting out by talking like that. And no, because I built I feel like a pretty good reputation over years of, you know, not treating people good. And so people treated me real well. And so, you know, this was one of the few guys I can remember who was really, I mean, just really bashed me on the internet. So it bothered me.
Hurt your feelings.
No, it just made me be like, what, you know, it made me mad. So Chris, all right, cool.
There's nothing more than
thing, you know?
Nothing more important than feelings. I mean, you got to look at today's day and age.
In today's age, you're right. You know, yes. I needed a timeout room. I needed a safe place to go in and think about my thoughts, but it wasn't around back then. So.
If I could kind of like help the kids at home, it's almost as if they liked one of your photos on Instagram and then they took the like back. Like it was nasty stuff. It
wasn't that bad, but it was bad.
So JT Taylor, you're training, you're representing integrated fighting again. It's represented as a grudge match. And I mean, Jeremy, I'm sure you remember the Desert Dogs fight team. JT is out of there. And what's crazy is this is October 21st, 2004. So when people ask me to kind of describe Chris as a fighter, I kind of draw parallels into the early 1920s, 30s boxers like Harry Greb guys that just kind of always fought. And the reason is, you know, here's the example. October 19th, you had a boxing match against Tom Kirk, which was 2 days prior to a really hyped up grudge match with JT Taylor.
Like I said, man, I was anytime I could get a fight, especially, you know, I was really loving boxing right then. So anytime I could get a fight and I was going to take it, and I was like, man, yeah, I'll fight whenever, man. So I don't remember, was it 2 days before it, you say?
It's 2 days. Yeah, 2 days prior.
Yeah, so I think I fought Thursday. I flew out Friday and fought Saturday.
You weighed in on Friday, fought Saturday.
I was already at weight. You know, I already made I think the fight was at 168, the boxing match. So I was already at 170. So I'm like, screw it, you know.
So what about weigh-ins and stuff? Did any of that like trash talk kind of carry over into?
No, he just tried to sit there and look hard, like, you know, a little scowl on his face. And I remember I was like, all right, cool. I might have said a little something like, well, you know, we'll see tomorrow. You know, we'll see what we've been. Got anything to say now? I can't even remember what happened. It wasn't a lot. I don't remember until after the fight. And fight didn't last long, man. It lasted about, how was it, 2 minutes?
2:53.
2:50, so about 3 minutes. I remember, you know, I get him in a choke, and I choked him, and he tapped out. I mean, it wasn't even that great, and he tapped out. And I remember I got up, and I was like, that was it? That was it? 2 minutes?
That's all you got?
That's all you got? I think I said, that's all you got? And then he was like, my rib was, I was like, I'm not trying to hear it, dude. So that was it. But yeah, after all that trash, he didn't even last a round. I was thinking, well, there you go. So yeah.
Yeah, Chris, after your fights, you're generally like a real nice guy. You had you had kind of an angry look on your face. Like it was still not enough for you.
No, it wasn't. I wanted to kind of put it on him. You know what I mean? I wanted to make him think twice about it.
Horn had an unsatisfying win like that too, and he spit on his guy.
Yeah,
right. He talked to. I think I was out of saliva at the time. My mouth was dry. I would have probably got him. I just kind of, you know, said that's all you got. But I mean, man, you know, like I said, at the end of that, I'm done with it, man. I proved it to him. Everybody's like, whatever, man. I just wanted people not to, don't. I mean, you know what I've realized about fighting is some guys, when you talk bad about them, sometimes they fight better, sometimes they fight worse. I always felt like I'd be one of the guys who, I liked it if you would talk bad about me. It's like that. You know who's like that is George St. Pierre. Like, look at the fights where he did really well. I think, like when Koscheck really was all over him, he looked fantastic, but like when Jake Shields fought him, he didn't look real good. Or Matt Serra the first time, he didn't look real good. I think if you have to try and get him mad at you to make him fight really well, if you're real nice to him, I don't think he's going to fight well. So some guys do better, some guys do worse. You just never know.
Yeah, that's interesting. So February 5th, 2005, UFC 51, bro, you drew Karo Parisian when he was like just a savage beast at this time.
Yeah, man. That was man, he tossed me on my head once. I remember that. That was not one of my
favorite a lot of people.
Fights. Yeah, but I mean, I just remember that was one of those fights. I did not feel it, man. I was just not feeling good during that. Like after the first round, I remember just thinking, man, I couldn't get going. It reminded me of that Tiki fight a little bit. My timing felt off. I didn't feel great. I lost a decision. I remember my plan was to try and keep it on my feet because I didn't feel like he was very great on his feet, but I could tell he did his homework and he didn't try to trade with me at all. He would just, kind of come in and just push me into the fence the whole time and really work on getting me taken down right away. And he was good enough on the ground then where I really couldn't get much offense going. Couldn't get any sweeps, couldn't get in any submissions. He was nice and tight and just stayed in good position, man. He just had a better game plan than me and implemented his game plan. I'd like to say there was more to it. I wish, maybe if I just didn't really have it in me to progress, to try and pull anything out. Like sometimes I can, but this wasn't one. I wasn't feeling. I don't know what it was, but I just didn't feel great, and he just put it on me that fight. That was a tough one for me, man.
Well, you had 3 opponents pull off.
I don't remember who else pulled off.
Man, I can only tell you what the commentator said. They said this was your third. Like you had 3 people pull off, and Parisian took it last minute. That's what they were saying. Yeah,
I don't remember that.
I think Parisian was on a card. Some things happened, and it just kind of put you two together. Jeremy, you studied quite a bit of footage on Parisian when he was going to fight Matt Hughes, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
What was your thoughts of him as a competitor?
Well, so I had seen, he was kind of one of the earlier guys to come to the sport with a high level of judo. So it was something kind of unique and new for a lot of people. And so like, I'm a grappler, yes, but I'm more of like a submission ground guy. So like Matt was way more the wrestling, the body control takedown guy. That was his area. So I remember talking to him one time and thinking, okay, I mean, Parisian's decent with his submissions, but like, what do you think about his takedowns? Because what he would do to everybody was if somebody pushed him against the cage, still do it today, get an overhook, and then you can drive off of that cage and you can get that throw really easily. It's real common. Still, even today, you'll see it a lot. And I remember looking at Matt going, like, do you think he'd be able to do that to you? And he literally started laughing. Like, there is no way in hell that he will ever take me down. No chance. And now you look at him, and yes, there are some elements of judo that play into fighting, but generally wrestling will be superior in all of those areas, because everything you can do in judo for the most part, other than the gi stuff, you can do in wrestling, but the reverse is not true. So
well, Jeremy, Chris and I, we do a lot of commentary together, and usually people, when they say, yeah, I'm a judo guy, 99.9% of the time they're lying. Like they've taken like a couple judo classes, but unless you've got a number on the back of your gi when you're in judo, when you're on the Olympic ladder, you're generally not a judo guy. You're just somebody that takes a class at the YMCA.
Yep. Well, and really when somebody says to me that they're a judo guy now, what I think is either a really nasty head and arm throw and some good foot sweeps from a clinch. Because I mean, without the gi, that's really what you're going to see a lot of with judo. So, yeah. I mean, that's a pretty limited arsenal if you don't have a gi on.
Man, it's very tough to just be that. I mean, there's a couple of very nice throws people can do, but how often are those hitting fights? You know, like maybe once a fight, maybe. Yeah. I mean, it better break the guy's ribs when you land on him because how often do you see a guy get thrown more than once?
Yeah, Chris, often. You got through twice in the second round. but like once
really well. The only once you do me good.
You didn't tuck your head. I think
no, I landed right on my head.
I think that blow would have knocked out 90% of that locker room. You got to have a
I landed right on my head. Bam! I remember thinking, the hell was that?
When you look at one of the greatest examples of that is Ronda Rousey when she throws, I believe it's Alexis Davis.
Yeah,
with a good knee and flows right into a head and arm and lands hard on her. I mean, that's the best you're going to see. Yep. You know, I think that's one of the biggest examples of what you're going to see from a dangerous judoka is somebody that's got that type of head and arm that can flow into it that smoothly from other positions.
Well, and I will say that was the first time I think I'd ever seen anything like that. I don't think I really trained with any judo guys. So, you know, I've messed around with stuff since then. I think you got a pretty quick learning curve on something like that. I think you learn, okay, I'm in danger now. I'm not letting that happen again. You know what I mean? After it happens,
you recognize those angles and you see where they're at and you see their hip coming in. You're like, oh, I don't like that.
Yeah, but I'll be honest with you. It's awkward when if you're not used to it. That can work very well, but after you've seen it a couple of times, it's just recognition.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I most enjoyed about that fight was Goker was in a corner of Parisian. He is in a full suit, like he is got the tie on, everything. I thought it was like somebody from the athletic commission. I'm like, why is that guy from the athletic commission giving him water? What is this? It was Goker. So, all right, May 19th. You didn't
want to be mistaken for a fighter.
Yeah. WEC 15. It's in California. It's Indiana versus Missouri. You draw Pat Healy.
Oh shit! Yeah. Well, that wasn't supposed to be the opponent. I don't remember who it was. It was supposed to be somebody else. I have no idea who, but I remember about a week out, they go, man, your opponent's out. And they're like, well, we're going to bring you out. We think we can, we'll get somebody else. But if not, you can just come out and do commentary or something. So I'm like, all right. So I went out there and I kind of thought I wasn't going to fight. I remember I wasn't training real hard for it after. I was like, okay, they're going to give me somebody else, whatever. And I remember I got out there and the day before they go, we got you a guy. You guys, Pat Healy is like, okay, you know, looked up his record is like 11-6 or something and whatever. And then it wasn't until a little bit later I started looking through and I look at some of the people who he's fought. And I remember I was like, oh, you know, I was like, okay, you know, it's like this guy's fought some good people, man. This guy might not be that bad of a fight. It's like this guy might be a little tougher than I thought. And I remember, so I get out there and like I said, the first round, I'm like, okay, this guy, you know, I didn't find him overly strong. He was strong, but not overly strong. So I remember, you know, I feel like I'm dominating. I'm flowing from submission to submission. Like he's doing a good job of not getting finished with him. I'm like, I remember I have him in a triangle for a while. I was like, that should have got him. I have him in like
rear naked choke.
Had him in a rear naked choke, and he got out. I'm like, damn. And I remember I had him in this. One of my moves I've used in the UFC a couple of times where I kind of step over the head and like get a reverse triangle and go for this arm lock. And I remember I had the arm lock and it was totally straight. And some guys are just kind of double jointed. So I'm getting it to where I'm using all my strength to bow that arm and he's not tapping. I remember thinking, dang, man, this is not working. You know, I don't understand. I can't bend his arm anymore. It's not submitting him. And I remember I get done with the second round and I'm like, I can't barely get up off the ground. My arms are spent for going for all these chokes in that arm lock. And I hadn't been like really mentally preparing right for the fight. So I remember I walked over the corner. I was just like, talking to Keith. I'm like, I got nothing left. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I got nothing left. And he's like, you got another round. I go, I know. You better get your ass back out. I don't know what to tell you, man. I was like,
yeah, the fight's that way.
Yeah. I remember at the end of the second round, I think he reversed me. And I was like, I'm done. And the third round, I remember I went out there. It's like, I don't know how many get past this. And so Chris, I tried to.
That's to interrupt your flow. I apologize.
No,
but in the second, like in the first round, you were squeezing for a rear naked choke for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And then like it was like, and he didn't get it. In the second round, you clearly win the first 4 minutes, but you lost the last minute of the second round.
Yeah.
So now,
like I said,
now you're walking into the third.
I'm just done. So I'm like, I am done. And I remember how it happened, but like, I think I might have pulled guard even. I'm so tired. I'm throwing punches. I get tired. He got in on me. And I was like, I remember I was on my back kind of against the fence. He might've shot in me. I remember if he shot in, I didn't fight him much. I was like, I'm going to get on my back. And I remember, he's trying to, mount an offense. I'm just remember thinking, I won the first 2 rounds. You just got to survive. And I remember at some point with about 2 minutes to go, he's trying to do something. I'm fighting. The next thing I know, there's blood everywhere. I'm thinking, Jesus, man, I didn't even feel that punch, but you don't always feel them, in the heat of battle. So I remember thinking, I'm cut and I'm cut bad. I do not want this fight stopped, So I remember I'm holding my head like this by the gloves, trying to make it to the ref doesn't see the cut. And there's blood on my eye and I can't see. And I keep trying to do this. And finally, I'm like, how is blood still getting in my eye? I can't. Is it that bad? I remember I finally look up and I see a Tim bleeding. So I was like, oh, okay. Let go. And I let the fight keep going. And then the round went over and I won a split decision, man. Somebody gave him the second round. But
all right. So in this fight, Chris is on the bottom. Healy's on top with some monster ground and pound. I think you slipped an elbow in and you look like you're shielding yourself. And the announcer's like, oh, Chris is Lytle's in trouble. They're all screaming because it's like it's so horrible because it's pooled in your eyes. It's like you're just like a windshield wiper, just not being able to get the rain out of your eyes. And then at the end, it's like, oh shit, that was Healy. It was bleeding all over Chris, and no one knew. Yeah. But like that would also include the judges because the way you were covering it looked like you were the one suffering.
I thought they were going to stop it. So I'm trying to like not let them see it and stuff. I'm like, no. And then, I had no idea. I couldn't figure out how I kept getting blood in my eyes. I was like, damn, it's squirting bad. But somehow it was him bleeding. I was like, cool. And then, yeah.
So Abe Belrano scored a 29-28. Healy, oddly enough, he was in that corner where he saw you kind of defending yourself, protecting a non-existent cut. Sanders and Cupperboard scored a 29-28 for yourself. And Ron Crunk, who's now working with yourself at Bare Knuckle Boxing, I might add, very good host. Yeah. He's talking to you like, hey, Chris, is this it? Like, man, great job. You've got nothing left to prove. No one doubts you. Are you going to hang it up?
Hey, man, I remember after that, I went out and I sat by the ring for like 20 minutes. I was like, I'm done. I'm beat. I can't move. I was like, something's not right. I don't know what happened there. But, yeah, I learned a lot about that. You would have thought I'd known by then about just wasting opportunities and squeezing too hard at certain times. I mean, that was last time. If I didn't feel like for sure I had a choke or whatever, I'm not wasting time trying to get it because I blew my wad just trying to choke that guy out and get arm bars, and I couldn't get it. And then I had nothing left, man. I mean, if you squeeze hard for about 3 minutes, I mean, you can't do it anymore. It was terrible. Left. No, there was nothing left.
Yeah, that was really interesting. You go back to fighting at Legends of Fighting. You had mentioned a guy named Keith earlier in the corner. You're talking about none other than boxing coach Keith Palmer. And on his show, August 13, 2005, he pitched you against Mr. Brian Dunn.
Yeah.
Which I was at this fight too. Do you recall anything a little bizarre taking place that evening?
Dude, I remember it was so weird because it was an outdoor event, and you don't like outdoor events because you don't know if it's going to rain. And I remember it was a stacked card, all the good people from, Indiana, some good guys from the Midwest were there. And we're looking out. We're like, man, I see thunder clouds. It looks like it's going to pour rain. So we're like, man, what are we going to do? We're like, let's go right now. We started the fights early. And I remember I'm the 11th fight. And the first 6 fights happen. They go, it's going to rain immediately. They go, you're up. I'm like, me? They go, you're up now. I go, okay. So I get out there and I knew Brian Dunn, and had a lot of fights, had about 50 fights at the time. So I was like, I got to come after this guy right away before it starts raining. So I went out there and put it on him right away, got him down, started elbowing him in the head, got him out of there really quick. And probably in the first 2 minutes of the fight, and we don't get outside the ring but about 10 seconds, and it starts pouring. I mean, lightning, thunder, everything. They're like, man, we had 7 fights, including the main event. That's it.
No refunds.
No
Yeah.
refund.
That's crazy.
Jeremy, this wasn't like a normal, it was like a tropical storm.
Oh, it was bad. I thought it was going to be a tornado for sure.
It was, I've never been so wet in my entire life. Yeah. And, you know, you got to give credit where credit's due. Keith Palmer, obviously the promoter of the event, but there was a legendary boxing promoter, Ron Kern from Indianapolis, in the audience. And I remember him looking at Palmer going, you need to put the main event in there right now if you want to make it happen. And Palmer's just kind of looked, and he looked at the sky and he goes, you know what, you're right. So, I mean, it was actually Ron Kern's idea to kind of move the main event, you know, to mid-card. But like you said, you didn't even make it one step out of the cage before that rain hit.
I do remember too what Keith said. He was like, look, for all those people who came, who their guy didn't get to fight, there was still 4 fights on the card. He said he gave them all free tickets to his next event and put those guys on the card. So it's like, you're going to get to see your guys. If you paid to come to watch those guys fight, you're going to get he didn't rip them off. So yeah, that's
super cool. But that's probably why Palmer didn't last as a promoter. He was incredibly
he was
ethical.
too honest. He was
Just a
too
great
ethical.
guy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Jeremy, did you ever fight in like a slip and slide type of event?
Hell yeah. Yeah. My first fight with Travis Fulton was like that. And it was kind of the same deal. I wasn't the swing bout, but I ended up being, because it was outside at John O'Donnell at in Iowa at a baseball stadium, and Pat was the main event, and they had to hurry up and get him in the cage before it started raining. And so he got to fight, and then I went in after him, and it started raining. He was kind of lightly drizzling all night, but they knew it was going to get bad, so they wanted to get him in there. But yeah, so it was bad. I was in his guard, and our feet were against the cage, and I could just push off, and we would slide all the way across the cage until our heads hit the cage on the other side.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, it was like a slip and slide. It was terrible.
Terry Martin fought Rob Smith in Canton, Illinois, in conditions that I've never seen before. Yeah, same situation. Same situation. Chris, UFC 55, October 7, 2005. You fight one of your buddies, guy that we've had on the show, Joe Riggs.
Yeah, that was a tough one, man. I remember, I got the phone call from Joe. He's like, Chris, Joe Riggs is going down to 170. We want you to fight him next. And like Jeremy said, there was no,
Did you come up with suggestions for him? There's Parisian, there's Hughes, there's
I mean, I wanted to fight, He was like, sure, I remember I called Joe afterwards, and because we're buddies, it's like, hey man, it is what it is. You're like, I know, I didn't really want to fight you either, but they said this is you're gonna fight. I'm like, all right, let's do it. So I didn't even know if he'd be able to make weight, because when I first met him, he was walking around he was fighting at 205. He fought my buddy Alex Steedlin, and we've talked about that as one of the nastiest fights you're ever going to watch. I've never seen a guy take a beating like that and win. When Alex beat Joe, that was the craziest thing. Jeremy, have you ever seen that fight?
No, I've seen it a long time ago, but I was out here in Utah training with Alex when he went to that fight, and he came back from that fight, and he was fucked up bad. And he said, if you ever see me taking a beating like that again, stop the fight. He was not kidding. Alex is one of those guys that's hard as concrete, and when he's like, look, man, that was the worst beating I've ever taken. I don't want to do that again. If that ever happens again, stop the fight.
He told me that fight probably took 2 years off his life.
Yep. For sure.
Yep.
So
it's a bad one.
Set the table at home. I think it was at the WEC. Was it WEC? What number was it?
It was 9? WEC when they fought. I don't know.
Was it 9? I don't know. I'm not going to commit on a number. So it is such a one-sided ass kicking, and it's so horrible. And was it the second round? I think Steven did he catch him in like a triangle? Was it?
Yes.
So we had Joe Riggs on, and I watched it in slow motion all the way to the end, like about 4 or 5 times. And I noticed as Joe was tapping after delivering just this train wreck of a beating on one side of train wreck on a guy, you see a towel fly over the cage, and it's Stiebling. The only time they threw the towel in was when he was actually winning the fight. Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible.
I remember, yeah.
He lived with Billy Rush in order to make sure that his diet was like on point for this. And Jeremy, you cornered Joe for this fight. Did he train with you?
Yeah. Yeah. He was out here. We were all in Utah here training this. That was when I first started my gym. So we were all out here in Utah.
What was he like in the gym?
Great guy. Like great training partner. He had a lot of power in his hands. So every now and then he get a little wild, go a little too hard in sparring. But for the most part, he was a great training partner. Always one of those guys that wanted to make his partners get better. You know, he wasn't there just trying to beat the shit out of everybody. You know, he wanted everybody to work. He wanted everybody to have a good time. He's willing to do whatever his partners needed. Great guy.
Joe's super great, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So you guys say he's a great guy. We've had him on here. He seems like somebody that's just funny as hell to me.
Very.
But if you look at his incidences outside of the cage, he's like a magnet for just shit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I could see that, and there's some truth to that. I think part of the reason is there are some people out there that just refuse to take any shit from anybody, so much so that they might even push into the fight just a little bit, you know? So like, you know, there's the kind of guy that will avoid the fight even when he could righteously whip your ass. And then there's the guy that maybe is going to lean in a little bit, you know? And that's kind of where Joe was. He wasn't afraid to fight, and he wasn't shy about going, hey, dude, why are you fucking staring at me? You know, and if it goes from there, then it goes from there, you know? But he's not the kind of guy that was going to get up and pick a fight, but he's not at all going to back down from one.
So he made the news recently because somebody went to the gym, his gym, and declared that he was actually the world bare knuckle boxing champion, this gentleman off the street. And Joe goes, oh, really? And
well, hold on. I think you said the guy came multiple days in a row and just kept saying he's the best bare knuckle fighter. I thought it wasn't just one time. But go ahead.
So Joe gave him a tryout. He gave him a bare knuckle boxing tryout. And,
2 minutes.
To Joe's credit, like, I don't know what this kind of trash this guy was talking, but Joe served him up. Anytime the guy went down, Joe would run to the neutral corner, be a gentleman about allowing this guy to get back up, and then just trounce him again.
You could tell Joe wasn't really he wasn't trying, you know what I mean? He was just, I don't even know if the guy threw a punch, but the guy kept coming in, and Joe would hit him like a few times lightly, not really hurt him, but then he'd like basically say, you're quit saying what you're saying because you're nowhere near, you're not the best guy in this ring, let alone the world. You know, it was pretty comical.
Miguel, you're muted.
I was going to say, it's insane how delusional people are. Like this guy, like Jeremy talked at length about this guy earlier when he was talking about the blob. You know, I mean, that's literally what this guy was, just some type of blob dude that walked in. He was not athletic, not anything. And Joe taught him a lesson, but did the right thing too. He didn't do what he could. He didn't do what a mean dude would have done. He's lucky he didn't go run into Barnett or someone surly.
So Chris, it's one of the few times you've been stopped in a fight by a cut.
Yeah. And the bitch of that thing is, I remember right from the beginning, I was thinking, okay, you know, we're going to stand up and we're going to throw some punches. And immediately Joe like rushed in and double underhooked me. I'm like, oh, you know, this is not what I thought was going to happen. And Joe's just, I don't know if you got, I mean, I think by the time we fought, he probably weighed about 195 pounds. He was bigger and stronger than me, I could tell. So immediately I'm kind of underhooked. I'm in trouble. And I just, only thing I could do, I threw a headlock and I actually took him down. I was like, I didn't think that was
a grammar school headlock. Yeah.
I just took him down right away. And I never try and get a takedown, but it was like a defensive thing in a way. I had to do it. And so next thing I know, I'm on top. I'm like, I didn't really expect to be here, but whatever. So I remember he gets like a gogoplata, not a gogoplata. He gets something in reverse, but I can't remember what it was. Umaplata something. And he's on top then. I remember that's where I saw the fight with Alex Keebly. And I was like, I don't really want to be here. So I was doing my best, playing good defense. And, you know, he's throwing his bombs, which, man, he had some of the most powerful. He'd kind of lean back like he's grabbing your feet and come with his right hand or this left hand. Bam. I remember right towards the end of the first round, he hit me with this left hand in the eye. And I remember it was only time I can remember this. It was just like, boom, he hit me. And my head was on the ground. I remember I just sat straight up, and it was just almost like everything went quiet and I was just sitting up. I remember I look off to the right and I kind of like, I'm not really paying attention to what's happening. And it's like, everything's quiet. And I turn back around and look straight ahead, and I see Joe like rear back to throw another punch. And then it all comes to me like, oh shit, you're in a fight, this guy's about to punch you, I remember boom, he hit me, and I sat up, my hands are down at my side. I look over to the left or the right. I look back straight and I see him about to punch me in my eyes, like, oh my God. So then I protected myself, and he throws a couple more punches. But I remember my eye at this point is swollen. And the bell rings, and I remember my coach ran in there, and I'm like, and I stand up, and I'm kind of, my balance in there. So I'm like trying to walk back to my corner, and I walk straight into the ring, and my Keith grabs like, we're back here, come back to me. And he definitely rang my bell, but luckily for me, I was in good shape. And after a round, I get up and I'm bouncing around to get my legs back. And after the first round, I was fine after that. Jamie, you guys remember how that went? I mean,
yeah. It's it. Jeremy, what were you guys telling Joe in between rounds? Because he had so much torque on his punches, like his ground and pound.
His ground and pound is otherworldly.
I'd say it's probably
so damn hard.
Power wise, he might be top 3 pound for pound in the world in regards to torque from the top position. There's very few people that can hit as hard as him from the top position.
Yep, I agree.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I always have been, I've always come from a little bit more of a, I guess, conservative background when it comes to winning fights. Chris is the kind of guy that wants to go out there and have a good show and have fun and just slug it out with people. And my goal has always been win the fight as efficiently and as reliably with as little damage as possible. And so I've always tried to pass that on to the people that I'm training with. So when I'm training with Joe and we're getting ready to fight Chris, and I'm like, look, Chris is tough as shit. He's never, ever been finished. You're not going to knock him out. Like, I know how hard you hit. You're going to run the risk of breaking your hands. You're going to run the risk of getting cut. You're going to run the risk of getting knocked out. Like, let's take him down. Let's fight smart. Let's get on top. Let's just grind him out and see if we can finish something from there. And some people listen to me and other people don't, but that was always my input with everybody is take him down. There's less luck on the ground. There's less freak accidents on the ground. Don't stand up and swing with somebody, because even if you're twice as good as them, accidents can happen and you might lose. So that's always been my input to everybody.
Well, I think he listened to you, because right away in the second round, we start off and he went in and he took me down right away. I remember I was like, damn, I wasn't ready for that. But I remember I got an elevator sleeping, and I swept him pretty quickly and got on top. I was like, okay. Yeah. I was feeling really good. I ended up in his guard. So I was like, man, I felt like from there, I felt like with that weight cut, it was the first time he made 170. I felt like he was fading pretty quick. I felt like, man, that's tired.
Very possible. He cut a lot for that fight. I mean, Billy always did a good job of helping people clean up their diet, but same shit. It's just common sense.
Well, the first time you make a weight, you're tired.
Yep.
And I felt like that was the case. So I remember at that point, I'm passing his guard. I'm like, okay, I'm going to pass his guard. I'm going to get side mount. If I get side mount on this guy, I feel like this is over, because I feel like he's tired. Joe's great, and but a tired fight is very difficult to deal with. So I'm passing his guard, and I remember he's pushing off on my head, and, so I'm driving in with my head, trying to, keep pressure on him, and I'm trying to pass his legs, and he just lets go this elbow like that. And it hit me right there with it. And it split my head open like 3 ways. It was like a volcano thing. And I was like, so as soon as he landed that on me, I knew it hit good, but I remember I went on his chest, like, oh, please, no, don't tell me this is as bad as I think it is. And as soon as I set up, there was just a pool of blood everywhere. I was like, this is not good, and the referee comes in right away. I remember McCarthy's like, break. And they put me up, and they're looking at it, and I remember at one point he's holding something on my head, and I think it's been a minute, I don't know. So I remember at one point I can't really see, because they're holding this thing on my head, and I'm like, at one point I go, hey, I think I'm gonna be all right. I can keep going. And he goes, what? I go, I think I'll be all right. And he goes, fight's over. And I looked around, like the ring card girls are in there and the announcers are in. I was like, oh, I didn't even know it
You
was
get a
over.
bag over your head.
Yeah, I'm at this thing on my face right here where they're trying to stop the bleeding, and there's like the doctors in there, and I was like, I think I'll be like, the fight's over, dude. I'm like, all right, well, this sucks. You know what I mean? I got a big cut on my head right here, and my eyes blackened from where he punched me in the first round. Like, well, this freaking sucks, man. It's like I lost the fight. Didn't I felt like I was in a dominant position. I don't even remember if I'd ever seen anybody be on top and get elbowed and lose at that point. It happened.
So Chris, what's it like walking into the fire department probably the next day, all taped up and sewn
even
up?
better. This is even better. I had a wedding I had to go to the next day in Flagstaff, Arizona. So I stay up late all night out partying, get on an airplane, fly to Phoenix, rent a car, drive up there, and my face is a wreck. I got a black eye that's swollen shut. And I cut on people were like, oh, you should have seen the looks I was getting it up. I was like in the wedding too. It wasn't good. It was pretty awful. Thanks, Joe.
That's not easy. Yeah. So, Jeremy, where would you put, who else would you put in your top three in terms of overall power from the top position?
Obviously Fedor's got to be up there. I've never been hit by him, but I'm just looking at what he does to people. That's got to be up there. Riggs.
Yeah, I don't know if he hits real hard, but he looks real good doing it because he's got great posture. As Chael.
Yeah. I don't think Chael had much power, at least not when he hit me.
But he looks real lethal
Yes.
when he's leaning back and stuff like that. He really plays the part.
He puts on a good performance. I don't know. I would think some of the guys like Ngannou, obviously those guys have incredible power. So, but again, that would just be a guess. But
that's something you really
got
have
the
to think
results,
about.
and I've been hit by Riggs, so I know that he hits hard.
Yeah, it's a topic that, in my opinion, people say, "Oh, pound for pound fighter, best sub guy." No one ever talks about power punches from top position, and it's a topic that needs to be explored. And Joe Riggs is absolutely pound for pound in the category. And Chris, I couldn't even imagine getting hit by that guy.
Man, like I said, it hurt, but I've been stunned before like that. I wasn't close to being knocked out or anything, but it rang my bell. The fact where I sat up and looked around, didn't know what was going on for a minute. Without a doubt, I was like, what? Oh, I'm fighting. Yeah, maybe it had to remind me. But what I think the most amazing thing about that is I went and trained out in Phoenix once for about 10 days with him and Edwin DeWeese. And I don't think I took Joe down once in 10 days. Yeah, and I took him down when we fought. Joe was, even when we sparred, Joe's one of the guys who I think he's even better in the gym. Jeremy, would you agree with that? He fought him. He was unbelievably talented. I remember thinking, good God, how did I ever take this guy down? How did I do anything to this guy? This guy's phenomenal.
Yep. So some people just had the right mentality for fighters, and some people didn't quite. And despite all the fact that all the success he's had, I think he's one of them. Like you said, he's better in the gym, because when he's in the gym, he's relaxed and he's calm and he's beating up his buddies, and he does well. But then sometimes you go into a fight and it adds a level of anxiety, and that anxiety can really fuck with people. It affects everybody to a certain degree. Some people not so much. Some people like Riggs a little more, and he just was never able to perform to the level that he's truly capable of. And I think a part of it is, the anxiety will do that to you.
Well,
so Jeremy, go ahead, Chris. I apologize.
No, he brought that up when he was,
yeah.
When he did our podcast with us, he brought that up, and he feels like he's in a better place. But it took him a long time to get there.
Yeah.
So Jeremy, there was an instance in the UFC where Matt Hughes was supposed to fight Karo Parisian. Parisian drops off the card completely. They slide in Riggs, but Riggs was training at your gym at the time. Right. And Matt was there as well. They said that Riggs told us that at the time, they said what they did was you guys just kind of flip-flopped. Like Joe would come in the afternoons and Matt would train in the mornings. Mm-hmm. How difficult was that as a trainer to have that in your gym?
Wow.
Very difficult. I don't like it, and I certainly would not have done it. But Matt was the champ and Joe was getting a chance at the title. So, I can't, that's a shitty spot. But the thing is, what I would always try to do was I would just try to encourage both of the guys to their strengths. Like, I'm not, this is what he does. This is what you're going to do to counter that, which is kind of what you do when you got an opponent coming up. You look at what their strengths are and you try to build a fight game plan around that. But it's like, look, we're going to train everybody to be as well-rounded as we can. Matt's going to work on his boxing, even though he's not going to box with Joe. Joe is going to work on his wrestling, even though he's probably not going to stop Matt from taking him down. Just everybody try to improve as generically as possible, just be good at everything rather than be specific.
You sat out as a cornerman that night.
I believe so. Yeah. I don't remember.
Did.
It's been a while, but yeah, I don't think I cornered anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild. That's, in the position that, sucked is what you just described it as. That's something that the American top team and some of the bigger gyms have to deal with on almost, a regular basis. I couldn't imagine being in that position. I wouldn't want to be.
Well, the thing is, like, it's one thing, like Joe's a friend of mine, and we trained together for a fair bit, but Joe was a guy that was a friend that came up to train with me from time to time. Joe was not somebody that was like a lifelong friend and training partner for years and years and years and years. So I like him. I call him a buddy, but there's a difference between fighting somebody that I'm friends with versus somebody that is my constant day in, day out training partner for 10 years straight. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to fight somebody, I'm trying to cave your eye socket in. I can't do that to somebody that I train with every day. You want me to do a grappling match against him? Sure. But you want me to do something where it is in my best interest to try to cripple you? I can't do that to people that I'm friends with. So,
yeah. So Chris, at this stage in 2005, you went 2-2 that year. How hard was that mentally for you?
Yeah, it was, I remember, I was very dissatisfied with my UFC performances that year. It's just like, man, I especially winning your first two and then losing the next two, it was like, man, I'm going the wrong direction here. I was trying to get up to a title run and, I'm totally backwards now, I felt like I was in a good position, especially I was thinking, after that fight, Joe, like you said, he got that fight with Matt Hughes. I was thinking, well, man, if I don't get cut, if I beat him, maybe that could have been my chance. It didn't happen. So I felt like I let a lot of opportunities get away from me. And, it's just frustrating. Like there's only so many times you can just like keep rebuilding. Like, okay, now if I win 3 more fights, I'm there. It's just, that's a frustrating spot to be in, man. But it's the grind, man. I just got to keep grinding away and try and, wait for my opportunity. I don't believe in luck, but if I keep doing what I'm doing and working hard, I believe, positive things are going to happen and they're going to go my way. If you just keep, doing, if you're close all times and you just keep going for that, I think positive things are going to happen. I mean, you got to change things up a little bit, but I just tried to keep doing whatever, be in the gym every day. And like I said, it was just kind of tough for me. I wasn't able to go anywhere and train much. I was just in Indianapolis doing my thing. But I think not long after this is when I get a phone call to be on The Ultimate Fighter. And so that's kind of when things really changed for me.
Yeah, you had another fight. We'll go one more fight and then we'll close out because we're coming up on 2 hours. Savant Young, WEC 18. So you're bouncing between the UFC and the WEC. The WEC you've had an incredible amount of success in. And Savant Young is kind of one of those new up and coming guys.
Hey, Chris, while you're bouncing back and forth with UFC and WEC, is there rumors about the purchase at this point? You hearing that they might eventually get bought by UFC?
I'd never heard anything about that, to be honest with you. I had no idea. I knew, it's just different because the UFC didn't have any light guys. I mean, they throw 155 in there, kind of, but then they were always kind of on the verge of, we're not going to have these guys. After they kind of like, after Jens, they didn't really have a title holder, and we had, Eve Edwards on. They talked about him kind of being the title holder, but not really. And I was like, 155, they're not even giving those guys any kind of love. And 45 wasn't even thought about, 35, no. So that's what the best guys, and I felt like the country were at the WEC. I felt like that was just a different how it was. I didn't ever think the UFC would try and buy them, but I mean, maybe I was just short-sighted, didn't understand the whole big picture and everything. And like, again, I'm of the old school mentality where the UFC put on 6 fights a year, you know, and so why would they even think about getting lighter guys that wouldn't be enough people on the card? I just didn't understand the fact that they were going to ever go to put on 50 fights a year or 30. You know, I just felt, well, hell, you know, they don't put on that many fights to make this work. So I would have never even dreamed that they would have purchased a WEC.
Well, here, Chris, were your WEC fights, your contracts, one fight or multi-fight contracts?
One fight.
Okay, so Jeremy, why does an organization not need to buy an entirely different organization only to add more weight classes when the contracts, they're one fight contracts? All you got to do is wait it out, spend a little bit of money.
Yeah, honestly, I think the main reason they did that was because they wanted to just crush any potential competition. All they wanted to do was buy the name and get rid of the name. And
yeah, they absorb. I think they absorb Breed Harris and they absorbed 2 or 3 people on the administrative side.
And they took a few fighters, and a lot of fighters ended up making it to the UFC.
The fighters did. Yeah. But
I mean, you know, good opportunity for them to cut a lot of people that they don't want. You know,
even if they were on one fight deals and stuff like that, they still, by buying the WEC, they still earn a lot of rights from those contracts. Probably something like, you know, they would have, like Jeremy said, rights of first refusal for certain guys that they like, that they can play in. They get to keep the champions if they like them, et cetera, et cetera. There were clauses in there that they probably had an eye. And the reason I mentioned it is, and I'm sorry I interrupted, but Mike is up to the Savant Young fight. That's in January 2006. And it is in 2006 that the WEC is purchased by the UFC. So I was wondering if you had heard any hints or rumors at that time. So sorry to derail that.
No, I never heard anything. One thing I would like to wonder about, the guy I always dealt with who, you know, I would always see Reed Harris there, but I was always dealing with Scott Adams. I thought he was great. He flat out fell off the face of the earth after that. I don't know what happened. He didn't come along in the deal. Does anybody ever hear what happened with that, or why not? Or
yeah, we might have to track him down.
Yeah, I think he's actually very findable and open to an interview if we ask the right people to reach out to him. I think that's definitely a good question, because he was a guy, you know, I'm going to venture a guess. The UFC probably kept him on salary for 2 or 3 years after that, didn't give him any work, and then just let him go. Yeah, I think that's what they did with Coker and certain other people too, where they just kept them on board for a little bit, stretched them out.
Yeah, maybe riding out a contract or something with them.
Yeah.
You don't think Coker was still working for the UFC even though he was in charge of Bellator at one point?
Yeah, that's what I don't know.
Explain a lot of the fights taking place in Bellator.
I definitely enjoy that conspiracy, but when they bought Strikeforce, I'm pretty certain that Coker was, you know, on the UFC payroll, and they really, you know, they didn't have. He was never a face for them on the show, talking, doing, working, procuring fighters. He was just receiving a salary to let him go away eventually. And probably Scott Adams received a similar treatment.
I would, when John Fitch's lawsuit comes to a head, I cannot wait to see the text messages between Coker and the UFC, and, you know, how often they took place and what was said. Chris, Savant Young, were you you were this cagey veteran with a ton of experience. They throw a younger cat at you. Was this just kind of walk in the park at this point for you?
I mean, you never expect a fight to go like that. I know I looked him up. He's a lot shorter than me. I figured I was going to try to keep him at bay, keep him with some boxing. I knew he was going to try and get in, take me down, do whatever. But I remember I get there. I believe he tried to get me in a guillotine. I think he tried to get up real high, and I just had like bear hug him, get him on the ground, and got side mounted and hit him with elbows until he quit, I believe, or maybe I choked him. I can't remember. But I think I just hit him with elbows till he quit, or the referee stopped it. But you know, just try to be a veteran out there. You know, something that a little bit to what Jeremy said there. Just on a fight like that, you just want to go in there and take care of business. You don't want to go in there and, you know, you're not looking to put on the greatest or put on this great war to, like, oh, the fans love that. You just want to go out there and take care of business.
Yeah, you need a W too.
Yeah, Chris, sometimes, like, one of the things that I enjoy while watching your fights is, one, you took second in state in wrestling at the state of Indiana in high school. And you're never one to shoot a takedown. In fact, you give up a takedown relatively easy because you don't mind playing the nail in order just to kind of weather a storm and tire your opponent out. But another aspect of your fighting is like, sometimes when you get your opponent's back, you will pull them into like a sitting position. Did BJ Penn influence that with you watching him fight?
No, that was more, I mean, that was kind of my wrestling style. Like I was a legger. I'd be in that position a lot, and I could control people very well from there. So I felt it's all about comfort level. I felt very comfortably in that spot. And, I like that. I had different submissions I can do from there, and very safe in that position. So just something I kind of developed, over years of wrestling. So it just made sense to me.
Okay.
I wanted to, is that something you regret over your career, not using your wrestling base as much? Because like I remember, like you were a boxer who at times could. Oh, and I knew you had submissions before that from our old relationship, but then you boxed, and you were still a guy. But you would pull guard on people, and that's like there are wrestlers who I mean, no wrestler wants to be on their back. But you were comfortable, and maybe from the Japan experience. But do you think that may have been the difference in some of the split decisions?
Oh, I know that. I mean, you know what? I mean, we haven't even talked about it yet, but I remember, I lost that split decision in the Ultimate Fighter finale. And that was the only fight I can ever really think of that I was like, man, I'm going to win this no matter what decision. I didn't think I was going to submit Matt or knock him out because he's too savvy, but I was like, I'm going to try and win a decision here. And when I didn't win it, I lost a split decision. I remember thinking, I'm never trying to do that again. Like it felt like I didn't feel like I thought like I wanted to. And, there was no positive out. There was no silver lining. There was nothing positive. I just felt like garbage and trash. I was thinking, man, I remember just thinking, I'm not going to let that happen. I'll go out on my shield every time before I let that happen again. I'll go out. I'm going to go out and try and knock people out or submit them. And if I don't, it's going to be a great fight either way. And I'm going to win like fight of the night or something. So, there was a couple fights in there in that time afterwards where I think if I could have got a takedown here, I probably would have won. But would I won the fight of the night? Would I have been satisfied with myself? I don't know. I mean, I always wanted to win very, very, very badly. But after that, I had to win my way too. Like I wasn't willing to just win at all costs. I wanted to go out there and I don't know. It was just weird. I had to win the way I wanted to win, and whatever that meant. And unfortunately, some of my favorite fights, my favorite boxing match of all time that I had was when I fought Omar Pittman, I got dropped and almost knocked out. And that was just because I had to dig deep and win. That meant a lot more to me than going out there and knocking some guy out in the first round. So I kind of enjoyed those fights. They're not good for you, and you can't have many of them. I remember you talked about Keith Palmer. I remember after one of my fights, I think it might have been that one. He was like, well, that's 2. I'm like, what do you mean that's 2? He's like, that's 2 wars you've had. We're at 5. Your boxing career is over. Like, what do you mean? He's like, we're not going to let you have wars all the time. And I was like, those people who do that, they don't have a good life at the end. It's not good for longevity. And I was like, well, that's where I was lucky. I had people around who actually cared about me, and they weren't going to just, he said, we're not going to drive this car till the wheels fall off. Like, I knew what he meant. I'm not going to be the guy who's babbling over there and can't remember things because I had 25 great boxing fights. That's not going to be me, So I know what, and unfortunately, those are a lot of the fights I like, but that's why I'm glad I hung it up when I did, because I like to fight that way, man. It's not the smartest, and I know that, and I understand that, and I could have done smarter things, and I wish I would have sometimes, but I don't know if I'd be happy with myself right now.
So I talked to, when doing research on this, even though we talk on a daily basis, I talked to your former boxing coach, Keith Palmer, and he said something to me that only the most advanced trainers do. And he said, a guy like Chris is real awkward. Like he's not real normal in some of the things he does, which, I mean, you've described your own self in terms of jiu-jitsu as falling into that category. He said, but what I learned with Chris was never try to change what he was doing, but rather tighten it up and add to it. And when you got coaches like that, you're in the right spot. Like you're at the right gym. Instead of them making you who they are, they're going to try to add and tighten up what you're doing. And, Jeremy, I think you can attest to that. That's incredibly important as a trainer to do with your students.
Oh, absolutely. That's like I was kind of saying earlier, that's what I've always tried to do is like, I want to encourage people to win as safely as possible. But they still have to be skilled in everything, but when it comes to fighting, yeah, you're going to have guys that are going to fight the way they're going to fight. And if you try to change that too much, you're going to take away what makes them successful. So, Sean O'Connell's a perfect example of that. He's one of my guys that fought in the first season of the PFL. Like, he's hard to take down, and he's got a head full of concrete, and he hits hard. He never really liked jiu-jitsu much. He never really did much of it. All he wanted to do was stand up and punch people. So I would force him to come to the gym and learn some jiu-jitsu, and he's decent at it, but it's never really what he liked, and he never really wanted to do it. So when it came time to fight, he's going to stand up and fight, and I would just grit my teeth and keep my mouth shut and kind of encourage him to do what he's doing well. Because if I tried to turn him into me, it would not have gone well for him.
Jeremy, did you ever train with Trevor Prangley?
No. I've seen him a few times through some other events, but we never got a chance to train together.
Yeah, I would have liked to seen you two go at it in the gym.
Yeah.
Excellent. Chris, awesome catching up with you.
Jeremy, thank you for just all your insight on stuff, man. It's great. We love having you on here. So
I love being
appreciate
on here, man. Like you said, it's awesome to reminisce with guys that were around back in the day. So anytime.
Good times, man. Thank you, man.
Jeremy, on a side note, I got a brother that's casual fan, watches the UFCs and stuff like that. Listens to the podcast, obviously. And about 2 months ago, he said to me that interview with Jeremy Horn that we did, which was all of 2 hours, I might add. He goes, "It's not right. You didn't." He's like, "I looked at his career. You guys need to do it over." He's like, "You skipped too many fights. That's Jeremy Horn." He was yelling at me about disrespecting you because it wasn't a 10-hour interview, instead of 2.
Well, we can definitely do it again sometime. I'd love to get back on with you guys.
We're gonna have to.
We'll set it up
for sure.
That's awesome.
Cool.
That's
Well, thanks, fellas.
Thank you very
Thank
much. Definitely, Chris. We'll get you for part 3 here down the line. Thank you, brother.
You good?
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Another deep dive in the books. Chris Lytle getting into his UFC career. Very interesting stuff, because now we're really getting in depth with 2 experts, with Horn joining us on the big show. This is big show stuff. This is a little bit different than what we usually do, where we're going through the early parts of their career and stuff. And it's fascinating stuff, huh?
Well, not only is it fascinating, like, you get the other person's perspective. Like, Horn he's a brilliant MMA mind. He's a brilliant mind. And, there's some people that follow the podcast that kind of stumbled across it on accident. They're not even hardcore MMA fans, but they enjoy the stories of the independent grind. And I've had a few of them say that, and these are people that definitely would not have known who Jeremy Horn was, prior to this podcast. And I've had 3 or 4 people approach me saying, that 2 hours just wasn't enough. You didn't do it justice. They told me that we should probably redo it with the new format that we have. And, we got Jeremy to commit to it. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to lay out his entire career, as well as, the big fights that he cornered in, and just kind of really walk down memory lane with him, and, maybe get 5 or 6 episodes out of it.
Yeah, I think like in his fighting career, he backs it up. He does come, to the podcast with a lot, with that reputation. And every time he's joined us, I've, never been disappointed. It's always been exceptional insights and stuff. And I think that carried over here. And him and Chris have a pretty good rapport. So, didn't really know each other like some of the Midwest guys did, but they definitely knew of each other, right? So very interesting podcast here.
Well, I think sometimes you can gain respect and even a friendship from somebody by looking across from them in a ring or a cage. You don't even have to say hello. You just kind of shake their hand after the fight, and you go, "Oh yeah, no, he's a good guy." Even though you've never gone to dinner, you guys don't chat or BS on the phone, It's just, what type of individual they are just based on what you saw, not only in the cage, but how they handled themselves immediately afterward.
Yep, no, for sure. So Chris Lytle, we got one more to do with Chris on the end of his career and stuff. And but this one was definitely, if you didn't realize that Chris was at the top of the game for a long time, you're starting to get a feeling now because we're getting, like I said, into the big show. So I enjoyed it. I always loved, living Chris's career. So reliving it is always good.
Yeah, absolutely. So ladies and gentlemen, please don't be a jerk. Don't be a nice person. It's a holiday season. Like, share, subscribe. New year, new you. Share this podcast. Jimmy. So, Miguel, always a pleasure. Love you, brother. Miguel, anytime I get to see your face on Zoom, even though you're in Costa Rica, it puts a smile on mine. I thought we had an amazing year, and I look forward to just keep kicking these things out.
Yep, for sure. And for the listeners out there, for a new spin, force your parents to listen. They may not really care about MMA, but at least it's some new viewers, and you can deliver us that as well. So thank you very much, and we'll be back.
6-year-old nephew, subscribe on their phone.
Set up his phone with the download the thing on a weekly basis. So anyway,
awesome.
Thanks, folks. And Chris Lytle in the books. I think we'll be back next with Chris Brennan, part 3. So we're into it. And then after that, it's 2022.
Check out the full interview on iTunes, Spotify, and all major podcast platforms.